Paula, welcome to DRV Gallery.
Well, thank you. It's such a thrill to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think of myself as somewhat of an accidental artist. I have a history around art, but it was kind of from the periphery. I started out in college needing to earn money and knowing that I probably wouldn't make a whole lot. With a major in psychology and women's studies, I started modeling for an art department, and I was a nude model for all 4 years of my undergraduate years. And having done that really opened my eye to the process of creating art and in particular painting. I sat through many classes, and what was fascinating about that is having to be still all that time, but listening to instruction, taking it in, and then being allowed to witness my image through the eyes of artists. So thinking of myself as a relatively small, maybe demure kind of gal, I'd see my shoulders really wide or parts of my body, bold, and then other people might choose to draw me or paint me in a more vulnerable place, more vulnerable looking, with different colors and textures. So through that experience, I took it in, but didn't get to really play with all of that instruction that I was exposed to. So I went through a career as you name it. I worked for a feminist health center doing HIV counseling and abortion counseling, going through procedures with women. So I was into women's health care for a long time, and then went off to graduate school and worked as a psychotherapist for years, and then ended my career working out of a middle school as a counselor and teaching part-time at the university doing adolescent development. So doing all of those things really took me away from my passion, which was eventually going to come back to finding a paintbrush. So imagine my surprise when from my home in New Hampshire, I was traveling through this area and never saw myself as someone who was going to be living in Florida. My parents lived here. I wasn't a huge fan of wanting to live in this area, and drove through Gulfport, and we got, people say to me that in Gulfport you either get it or you don't, and we got it. And we found our peeps. So we found ourselves in Gulfport, and I thought, okay, this is the time. I left my career and decided, I can start these new chapters. So I started painting and came up with a repertoire of paintings. And when I say being an accidental artist, I then applied for Gulfport Chamber Merchants Rise and Shine grant. And I thought, if I don't try to jump into something now, it'll never happen. So I did, and I got the grant. Imagine my surprise, because all of a sudden I had to come up with a body of work that I could start showing at Gulfport art walks and art festivals. And I was feeling fairly clueless about, okay, so I don't mind putting paint on canvas, but then I have to frame things, and then I have to figure out how to title my pieces, and then I have to price them. That whole process was completely foreign to me. In fact, I would have been more comfortable just giving away my art. So having started that process 4.5 years ago, I find myself here now with some pieces of art that I have at this gallery, and I look forward to continuing my 10,000 hours to mastery. I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell, and when I first read his book that described finding mastery, I find myself maybe at the first 1,000, so I'm patient with my work, and I want to be able to see the images that I paint. Learning how to do that has been my greatest challenge, and I have studied with a mentor. I have a local mentor here in town whose name is Jack Providante, and he is an amazing artist, and he's about to move to the Northeast, so I won't be working in person with him anymore. I've been studying over at the Santana Arts Center, and I have a group of people that I study there. But my real passion now is working with plein air. And there are also two other artists in the wintertime that I go out and do plein air with weekly. And they're well-known Gulfport artists, and I have learned so much from just being in their presence. Joyce Burkholder and Nancy Poucher are two amazing artists that to me have opened my eyes to where I want to be, and that's outdoors with my easel. So the work that I've represented here is all local. It's mostly here in Gulfport. There's one piece from Paso Grill. But for the most part, I try to do a lot of my work with the beauty that surrounds me right here in Gulfport.
It's beautiful work. Who are your inspirations, influences? Are there any classical or impressionistic artists that you feel particularly inclined toward?
Oh, absolutely. Oh gosh, it's funny. I'm not a huge student of art history, but I've loved the early Impressionists. Are a lot of what the work that Jack Providante has based his teachings on. So certainly Monet, Van Gogh. But I love the work of Mary Cassatt, and there are several other women who fully inspire me. I do spend a lot of time, I was a member at the Dali Museum, and I spent a lot of time just sitting there with pieces. I was also lucky enough to grow up in the Boston and New York area, so I have certainly spent as much time as I can with plenty of pieces that I get to visit.
I'm reminded of Renoir quite a bit.
Cleaning the catch. Oh, well, there's a story with this one. So, thank you for the Renoir example. I've never thought of myself as exacting. I know I had a conversation with someone recently, and I talk to my teacher about this all the time, that I paint while kicking and screaming, not want to have to learn to draw. So drawing is something that is a huge challenge for me, and but painting, for whatever reason, allows me to kind of bring images forward. So this particular piece is close to my house here in Gulfport. I live over by the marina. And what was funny about this piece is it did happen at dusk. I was riding my bike out to the Coast Guard building to watch the sunset, and these men were cleaning their catch. And I see that routinely when I go out for my sunsets. And something that appears so mundane and so everyday just caught my eyes to see the communication between some of the pelicans and the other birds that were showing up, and these guys just kind of throwing their pieces out to the birds and focused on their things. And I said to the men, I said, "Do you mind if I photograph you?" And they said, "Oh, we would be honored." I said, "Well, someday maybe I'll have you on a canvas." So that's where that came from.
You have a real gift for capturing light.
Light is something that I'm learning to work with. I'm learning to see as an artist. So, finding values is hard for me. I talked to my mentor about having poor values, and my mentor is convinced me, no, your values are fine. But I'm working at trying to establish what values are. Like, for example, this piece here, it was so dark in the background, and this was from a scene over at Wood Ibis Park here in Gulfport. And it was one of those freaky days where we have a variety of characters at the feeding well, and I wanted to capture that. And I thought, oh, piece of cake, just, what was it, 5 birds? I can do 5 birds. But then I realized that I kind of had 10 because I had all these reflections, and then they were upside down. I just love color. I do have friends who have made fun of me for years because they've said, Paula, most of us wake up in the morning and we grab whatever clothes are on the floor next to our bed and just throw them on. But for you, Paula, you wake up in the morning and your clothing is a palette. You find a way to pull the colors together or the textures. My colleagues at the Suntan Art Studio often talk about my work with water and clouds, and I love doing clouds. I can just get lost in clouds, and finding the light in clouds, the color in water, and how it reflects. I feel like I could spend the rest of my life just working on that, and leave the people alone, or the other.
What medium do you prefer to work in?
Oh, these are all oil paints, and I prefer oils. It's funny, a lot of people do acrylics or watercolors. For me, those mediums are pretty challenging. Acrylics dry too quickly for me, even though I could probably find more colors in acrylics. I use oils, but these are water-based oils, because I was trying to stay away from some of the toxicity in the solvents that have to be used for oils. But water-based oils now they've come such a long way, even in the past 5 or 10 years, that it's pretty exciting to see what's available for colors. So my medium of choice is really oil painting. Watercolors, the permanence, like once you put that mark down on the paper, you have to commit. Maybe I have a hard time with commitment. I can paint over these. So as they're a process, one of the things I'm learning to do, and it's taken me, I can't talk about the decades. It's taken me the first couple of years to learn how to wipe out what I started. And maybe that is the sign of getting to become an artist, is learning detachment. And I even had to do a bit of that recently with evacuating for the hurricane, because I'm in Zone A and we had to leave our house, so we packed up our home. And I had all my paintings there, and I stored some of them, but there must have been 50, 100 other paintings that I was willing to walk away from, knowing that there's more inside me. There's plenty more inside me where they came from, and I'll just keep creating. So imagine my wonder when we came back to a house that was still standing, and I feel very grateful for that. You can see my work here at the DRV Fine Arts Studio and Gallery, and you can come to my website at proyfinearts.com. I have a website there. I'm also on Facebook, and I do have some Instagram photos, but I primarily show my work through my website, proyfinearts.com.
Great. Paula Roy, thanks so much.